If you are recovering from high conflict personality abuse, from a narcissist, a psychopath, or a cluster B individual, you have likely heard this dangerous myth. You are a victim because you are an empath. Your big heart attracts predators. This toxic narrative suggests that your fundamental nature, your capacity for connection and care, is a flaw, a vulnerability that must be suppressed if you hope to survive. But we here at the Resilience Protocol, built by licensed professionals, state this clearly. That statement is not only damaging, it is clinically inaccurate. Empathy is not a liability. It is a high-level emotional skill and a profound gift. In this protocol, we will prove that vulnerability is the true target of manipulation, not empathy itself. We will give you a framework to transform your emotional intelligence into an impenetrable defense system. The belief that big hearts attract predators is more than just a catchy phrase. It's a potent form of clinical victim blaming. When we accept this narrative, we fundamentally shift the responsibility for calculated malice away from the abuser and onto the victim's inherent good nature. Think about the psychological consequence of this shift. It forces survivors to believe that their abuse was inevitable, a natural result of who they are, rather than the result of another person's predatory choice. This prevents effective healing. If you believe your capacity to care is your flaw, how can you ever trust your own emotional intelligence again? It fosters shame, encourages self-doubt, and guarantees that the cycle of self-blame continues even after the abuser is gone. We must discard this victim-blaming idea immediately, recognizing that holding profound empathy is not the reason we were targeted. It's time to shift our focus entirely from asking, "What's wrong with me?" to "How was my defenselessness exploited?" To move forward, we need professional clarity. We must draw a clear distinction between the capacity for empathy and the state of vulnerability. Empathy, clinically defined, is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It's a sophisticated cognitive and emotional skill that requires significant intellectual capacity. Now, vulnerability, in this context, is entirely different. Vulnerability is a systemic gap in defense. It's the lack of protected, non-negotiable boundaries, or a compromised sense of self-worth that manipulators actively and calculatedly exploit. Imagine a fortified castle. Empathy is the ability of the castle's occupants to understand the movements and needs of the people outside the walls. Vulnerability is the fact that the drawbridge was left down or there was a hole in the wall. The predator targets the structural gap, not the occupant's insight. Abuse targets the weakness of the perimeter, not the sensitivity of the internal emotional system. The narcissistic or psychopathic dynamic seeks low resistance and high return. Your empathy only becomes a liability when it is coupled with a lack of self-protection. If empathy isn't the flaw, what is the dark personality actually looking for? We must shift our focus entirely to the motivations of the abuser. Narcissists, psychopaths, and high-conflict individuals are driven by two clinical needs: supply and control. They don't seek out the deepest, most compassionate person. They seek out the easiest, most compliant source of supply. They look for compliance, utility, and a high potential for mirroring. They look for the person who will quickly absorb their emotional projections, minimize conflict, and provide low resistance to escalating demands. Their strategy is logistical, not emotional. For example, a narcissist will target someone in a state of grief or transition, not because that person is inherently too nice, but because they are temporarily resource depleted and less capable of fighting back. The manipulation strategy is driven by the abuser's need to fill their internal void, and they seek the quickest route to that outcome. Understanding this removes the personalized shame and allows us to see the attack for what it is, a purely predatory strategy targeting systemic weakness. Now let's reclaim empathy. We must redefine it, not as a burden, but as a highly sophisticated form of emotional intelligence, or EI. This advanced EI is actually a core survival mechanism. When you possess profound empathy, you are processing social data faster than most people. You are keenly attuned to subtle cues, micro-expressions, shifts in tone, and nonverbal language. This is what many survivors call intuition or gut feeling. The goal in trauma recovery is not to dull this emotional instrument. That would make you less safe. The goal is to train this advanced EI to process threat data and recognize red flags faster before deep emotional investment takes hold. You are naturally equipped with sophisticated sensors. The Resilience Protocol requires you to trust those sensors and act immediately on the data they provide, without allowing the manipulator to override your internal truth. Your high emotional intelligence is your greatest weapon against deceit. This is Protocol I, the resilience equation. The first step toward turning empathy into self-defense is integrating profound emotional understanding with non-negotiable personal boundaries. We call this empathy plus rigidity. This is where you learn to compartmentalize. You can feel compassionately for the external pain, limitation, or history that drives an abuser's behavior, and that understanding is important clinical insight, while simultaneously maintaining a rigid, absolute boundary against their harmful actions. For example, you can acknowledge this person is acting out of deep historical insecurity while still concluding, but I must deny them access to my life because their behavior is destructive. Empathy is external observation. Rigidity is internal application. This synthesis means you are no longer sacrificing yourself on the altar of another person's suffering. You are leveraging your understanding to protect yourself, not to save the abuser. Protocol the 7 of a weaponizing self-compassion. Often, we view self-compassion simply as a soothing balm, something we apply after the damage is done. But true self-compassion, in the context of recovery, is a rigid internal protective mechanism rooted in non-negotiable self-worth. To weaponize it means establishing an internal benchmark. You refuse to tolerate any treatment from anyone, including yourself, that violates your established standard of kindness, respect, and dignity. When you consistently practice self-compassion, you are always checking incoming data against this established internal benchmark. When an abuser attempts gaslighting or devaluation, they are attacking your reality and your worth. But because you have built that standard internally, their attack registers as a factual violation, not a personal truth. It makes you instantly impenetrable to hoovering and devaluation because you possess an established internal definition of what respectful treatment looks like. You don't need external validation because the truth of your worth is already anchored within. Finally, Protocol the 3rd, utilizing self-compassion as an early warning system. Your sophisticated empathetic system processes emotional pain very quickly. In the past, you might have processed that pain as an invitation to help or fix the abuser. Now, we are training it to process that pain as data. If a behavior triggers internal pain, distress, or a violation of your established self-worth protocol, your EI immediately registers a danger signal. This system is designed to trigger before deep emotional investment takes hold, before you've already invested 6 months or 6 years. This pain is not weakness. It is your defense system working perfectly. This teaches the survivor the most critical skill, trusting their internal emotional data over the manipulator's external flattery, promises, or manufactured crises. The moment you feel internal distress, you must stop, analyze the source of that distress, and treat that signal as an automatic red flag requiring immediate protective action. No exceptions. Understanding the protocols is intellectual, enforcement requires action. To fortify your boundaries using this new emotionally intelligent framework, you need clinical consistency. Stop engaging in cycles of explanation. When a boundary is violated, your response must shift from explaining why the boundary exists to enforcing the consequence. Utilize structured low engagement tactics, such as gray rocking, not as a way to hide, but as a boundary enforcement measure that communicates, I will not be supplying energy to this behavior. The critical step here is emotional detachment. You can be professionally empathetic. You can see their pain, but you must be emotionally detached from the outcome of their reaction. Your mission is survival and recovery. This requires a structured approach. First, identify the violation clearly. Second, state your boundary once. Third, immediately enforce the consequence through action, not discussion. This removes the supply and fortifies your perimeter against further breach. Your profound capacity for empathy is not your flaw, it is your greatest asset. The Resilience Protocol confirms that we must protect this asset with structure and strategy. Remember the 3 core protocols we established? 1. Integrate empathy with rigidity. 2. Weaponize self-compassion as a non-negotiable standard of worth. And 3. Utilize your heightened emotional intelligence as an early warning system. Viewing trauma recovery is not about regaining lost innocence, it's about building impenetrable mental fortitude. You are transitioning from survival mode to a state of sustained thriving. If this framework has clarified your healing journey and empowered you to redefine your boundaries, please let us know by liking this video. Subscribe to the Resilience Protocol for weekly, clinically informed strategies on mental fortitude and emotional freedom, and watch one of our related videos on narcissism or trauma recovery listed on your screen now. Continue building your defenses. We are here to support your journey from surviving to thriving.